Hi there, I'm Sue Resnick and we've got a new recipe today. It's for tomato soup or tomato sauce. And the difference is at the end of the recipe, so you'll have to hang in there for that. But the beginning is exactly the same. And I've been making this a lot lately because it's so delicious. So here's how I start. I start with 3 pounds of fresh organic tomatoes. I've already diced up 5 of the 6 tomatoes that I had. These are big tomatoes. Each one was a ½ pound. And I just wanted to show you how I prepared it. So I saved the biggest one for last. So here's my basic tomato. I'm just going to use a paring knife and cut that stem core out. That's it. Just take that out like that. And then I'm going to use a serrated knife because that's a little easier on tomatoes. Unless you have a nice sharp knife, I find a serrated knife works easier on tomatoes. And I'm going to cut it in half, cut it in half again, cut it in half again because it was so big. And then I'm going to cut it into strips. One way, I turn it, and then I cut it the other way. This gives me a nice large dice. About a 1-inch dice is what I'm shooting for. So for the smaller tomatoes, I didn't have to make as many initial cuts. I just cut a 1-inch dice. I'm going to do that with this guy too. There we go. Quick and easy. Got my dice. Now, this recipe has the 3 pounds of tomatoes, a ½ of a sweet pepper, any color you want. You can have red, green, orange, or yellow sweet pepper, ½ of a pepper, ½ of an onion. You can use white or red or yellow, doesn't matter, and 4 cloves of garlic. Now, what I've got here are 2 smaller cloves and 1 big clove. So I'm counting him as 2. So we've got 4 cloves of garlic here. But I'm going to get these. Now you don't have to cut these up fancy at all because this is all going to go into the oven. So I'm just going to slice through that quick. And I'm going to turn and go the other way. I'm keeping the pieces big, about a 1-inch dice, just like I did the tomatoes. There. Just sprinkle it around in. I'm going to throw my garlic cloves in there. I'm going to cut my big one in half. So he's just like the little guys there. And then the same with the pepper. Just a quick dice. You're going to love how easy this recipe is. You notice I didn't even have to peel the tomatoes. It all gets pureed at the end. Now, that's all the ingredients. Now, all we need are seasonings. So, I'm starting with a ½ teaspoon of my butterblend. Now, this is a recipe that you can find online. I have it a couple times, butterblend. It's an herbal blend that gives richness. I kind of use it in place of butter or in place of salt in cooking, not in baking, but this would be in cooking. Uh-oh, doesn't fit my bottle. So I just need about a ½ teaspoon of that. I'm gonna sprinkle, oops, guess it all went in one spot. Sprinkle it in there. This is a ½ teaspoon of rosemary and a ½ teaspoon of thyme. These are these herbs that I use to replicate an Italian flavor when Gerson doesn't allow Italian herbs. It doesn't allow oregano. It doesn't allow basil because of the aromatic oils that are in those herbs. They have found in the healing process that those oils stopped the healing process. So we don't want to use those. So we can use a ½ teaspoon of thyme and a ½ teaspoon of rosemary, a ½ teaspoon of butter blend. And you know what this is? This is organic mace. And I'm going to put a few sprinkles of that in there. It's just, you don't taste it in the finished soup, but it does give a nice little extra flavor, okay? Just a little shake. There we go. We can always add more. We just can't take it out, can we? And 2 baby basil leaves. They're really little, so I'm using 2. If you have a good sized one, just use 1. And I'm going to tuck those down in there, okay? And I'm just going to mix it up a little bit. Get those herbs mixed in. Get the onion and the garlic mixed in. Oh, you know, it's so tempting. It looks so good raw. I just would like to eat this raw. I don't know what it would taste like, but it sure looks good to me. See if I can get the light in there. There we go. In case you have wondered where I am, we're up in the Adirondacks again. This is our anniversary. And we, every year, find ourselves back up here in the Adirondacks. Now, I'm putting this in a 350-degree oven, and I'm setting the timer for 2 hours. You know, there used to be someone who advertised on TV, set it and forget it. This is kind of the original set it and forget it. You just throw all the ingredients into your pot, throw it in the oven for 2 hours, and when we come back, we're 1 step away from having our soup or sauce. So we'll see you in 2 hours. All right, we went on a little hike while this was baking, and we just got back and the timer was beeping. So we don't know what time we left. I'm guessing it's been about 2 hours. I don't think it's been too much longer than that. You know, it could be a few minutes more, but let's see how it looks. Oh, it looks perfect. A few crispy bits there. Now, one of the advantages of preparing it this way, instead of just simmering it on the stove, is you don't have to babysit it. You don't have to worry about whether it's going to scorch. See, there's a little bit of color there. That's just the way we want it. I'm going to let it cool for a little bit now. I don't know, 15, 30 minutes. I don't mind if it's still warm. I just don't want it molten hot out of the oven. And then we're going to put it in the blender. And in the meantime, while it's cooling off, I'll go in and pick out those bay leaves. They don't need to be pureed in. So we'll come back when it's ready to puree, okay? All right, I waited about 15, 20 minutes for that to cool off. It's still hot, but it's not scalding. And I'm just going to run it right now, just the way it is, and get it pureed. You know I'm going to shorten the video a little bit and cut out the long part of it blending, but this is all I'm going to do. Now I do have a high power Vitamix blender, so it goes pretty quickly. If you have a regular blender, it's just going to take you a little longer. And I want you to see, now this is the sauce. This is how I make the tomato sauce. And I want you to see what a nice texture this is. See, that makes a nice creamy, I'll put my camera so you can see it. There we go. And actually I would run it longer. I want it creamier. So I would run it longer, but this is how I make my sauce. But in order to make it soup, I do thin it down a bit more. This is just for show. And if you taste it and it tastes a little sharp to you, you can, oh, I'm adding 2 cups of water. This is the difference between sauce and soup. 2 cups of water. It's not a big deal, is it? But then I'll run it some more. Our soup. I do let it run a good bit because I like to get it really creamy. I'll show you how. Oh, here, this is what I'll use. Now I tasted it, and it tastes very nice. These were nice tomatoes. They weren't real sharp. If you find it tastes a little sharp for you, you can add just a little maple syrup, maybe to sweeten it, to cut the edge from that sharpness, or you can add a little homemade oat milk to help cut the sharpness. So here we go. Now, if I was serving this for dinner, I'd want to warm it up a little bit more just because of it cooling off. But you can see it's a nice texture, and I find myself keeping this in the refrigerator. And when I have a recipe that calls for vegetable broth, I'll use half tomato soup and half water. That's a vegetable broth, right? It doesn't always have to be a plain vegetable broth. It doesn't always have to be Hippocrates soup. And this, to me, is easier to make. You know, it's just tomatoes. But it's so good. And I've started making casseroles using this. Oh, it just tastes so good. It just tastes so good. I love it. I've been eating this like crazy. I'll have it for lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner, lunch and dinner. And the casseroles, you know, it gives it a creamy something to go into a casserole with potatoes. And now not Gerson, I'll put lentils and things in, but as far as Gerson goes, I'll see if I can come up with some recipes where we can put this with the potatoes. I've even, you know, used it as thrown potatoes in it and cooked it as a soup. I've put cabbage in it. I made it the base for a soup. Oh, it's so good. So I hope you have some fresh organic tomatoes at hand for you to make tomato soup or tomato sauce. And I'd love to hear how yours turns out. Okay? All right. Delicious.